The trendy gastropub in downtown Chicago was deafening. Condensation dripped down the cold glass windows. But the air inside our booth was suffocatingly hot. Chloe was looking down with a shy smile, her fingers naturally brushing against Ethan's collar, smoothing out his dark silk tie. Our friends at the table started teasing them, saying they looked like they were getting back together. Chloe didn't deny it, she just gave him a look. A look filled with a sparkle I had never seen. The whole table suddenly went dead silent, everyone cautiously glancing at me to see my reaction. I just slowly picked up a paper napkin, wiped the cold condensation from my fingers, stood up and started clapping with perfect elegance. I looked at their shocked faces, and casually said, "What a beautiful moment. Congratulations on finding your soulmates again." 3 days ago the ER at Northwestern Hospital was freezing. The smell of bleach and rubbing alcohol made me nauseous. Chloe was supposed to fly back from a work trip. I took half the day off to pick her up at O'Hare. But my mom suddenly collapsed in her kitchen that morning. The heart monitor beeped relentlessly outside the trauma room. I leaned against the cold tile wall shaking, and dialed the only number on my emergency favorites list. It rang forever before she finally answered with an annoyed sigh. I told her my mom was in recess and I was terrified. But over the sound of airport cafe jazz music, she coldly said, "Ethan lost his wallet at the terminal. I need to help him sort this out, I can't listen to you complain." I could hear Ethan laughing lightly in the background. It felt like an invisible hand was crushing my heart. I asked if someone else's minor inconvenience would always be more important than my family dying. She scoffed and told me to stop being so dramatic. Then she hung up without another word. The dial tone felt like a razor blade, slowly cutting through our 3 years together. I stared blankly at the dark screen. The warm space she used to occupy in my heart suddenly felt as freezing as the Chicago winter wind. Whenever we had a Cold War in the past, I was always the one to swallow my pride and beg for forgiveness. Because I thought finding love in this massive city was rare. I was so afraid of losing her that I kept lowering my boundaries. But this time, when my messages wouldn't deliver, my breathing didn't even hitch for a second. The fire that used to burn so fiercely for her felt like it had been put out by a bucket of ice water, leaving nothing but a few wisps of pale smoke. After my mom was stabilized, my dad patted my shoulder. He looked exhausted and sighed, asking if Chloe was mad again. He said she called them, complaining that I was ignoring her. Hearing her self-righteous accusations just felt absurd. Our dynamic for 3 years had always been this tilted. She could make any demand at any time. She could vent all her toxic emotions without a filter. And I just had to play the role of the perfect punching bag. If she showed even a tiny crumb of affection, I was expected to be grateful and pretend nothing happened. When I finally dragged myself back to our West Loop apartment, she was sitting on the couch flipping through a Vogue magazine. She looked up at me with her usual arrogant stare, and said, "Your parents forgave me, so stop playing the victim." I stood in the entryway, too tired to even take off my shoes. The life and death terror I felt outside the ER was just a cheap manipulation tactic in her eyes. She would never know how much I needed a hug in that moment. Even just someone to sit next to me on that plastic chair. But all I got was abandonment for another man. The next day my phone buzzed a few times. She sent a picture of a slice of red velvet cake from that famous bakery downtown. The caption said, "Today is our anniversary. I got your favorite flavor waiting for you at home." A month ago this would have made me ecstatic. I would have cancelled my meetings and rushed back. Maybe bought the most expensive roses from the florist. But looking at that perfect slice of cake on my screen, I only felt a deep wave of physical disgust. I mechanically typed the word OK and locked my phone. Because my upcoming corporate merger was a million times more important. When I pushed open the apartment door at 11 p.m., I was greeted by pitch black darkness and freezing air. The cake box on the counter hadn't even been opened. I thought she got into an accident and called her frantically. But by 1 in the morning she still hadn't answered. I opened Instagram to see if her friends posted anything. And saw a blindingly painful photo on Ethan's story. It was a view of the Chicago skyline from Lake Shore Drive. 2 steaming cups of coffee resting on a car hood. The caption read, "The hardest days are better with someone who gets you." Right next to the coffee was a limited edition vintage watch. The exact model I had mentioned to Chloe 100 times. I stood in the empty living room listening to the wind. The fortress of our relationship instantly crumbled to dust. But the collapse didn't hurt the way I thought it would. Instead, I felt like a man who had been drowning for years, finally breaking the surface to take a massive breath of fresh air. In her mind, a boyfriend's feelings could be trampled on. But her best friend's bad mood required an all-night therapy session. I finally accepted this brutal reality. I thought I would be hysterical like I used to be. But I just took a hot shower and went to sleep. Half asleep, I heard the front door click open. Chloe walked to the bed smelling like midnight rain and cold air. She reached out trying to tuck the blanket around my shoulders. But my eyes snapped open completely clear and awake. I looked at her shocked face and kept my voice perfectly steady. I said, "You should take a hot shower before you catch a cold." The air in the room froze into a solid block of ice. She wasn't used to me being this emotionally detached. She opened her mouth to explain, but her phone lit up. Ethan's message glared brightly in the dark room. He said, "I made it home. Did your boyfriend yell at you?" Chloe quickly grabbed the phone and typed "good night." He instantly replied with a smug emoji, saying, "Looks like you still wear the pants in that house." I watched her careful micro-expressions as she tried to hide it. In the past, I would have snatched the phone and screamed. We would have fought all night about boundaries. But tonight I just rolled over and gave her my back. I was too exhausted to argue with someone committed to misunderstanding me. She always said Ethan was just a brother to her. And called me a controlling freak with zero self-confidence. But what kind of adult who respects their partner allows another person to invade their territory like this? She understood boundaries, she just knew I had no bottom line. Since she enjoyed the thrill of emotional cheating, I had no reason to keep trying to wake up someone pretending to sleep. The next morning she walked out of the guest room, pointing at a fancy shopping bag on the sofa with a proud look. She said, "I had a friend bring this back just for you." I walked over and saw a cheap, poorly made mustard tie. I couldn't help but let out a low, dark laugh. I said, "Chloe, do you really think you can just hand me the garbage someone else didn't want and expect me to smile? That vintage watch you gave away was your real confession, wasn't it?" Her fake gentle facade shattered into a million pieces. She yelled defensively, asking why I was always so bitter. She said he bombed his interview and was depressed. Was I supposed to just abandon him as a friend? I looked at her flushed face and spoke as lightly as discussing the weather. I said, "You politely looked at the city lights and talked all night. You politely announced your soul connection on social media. I really don't mind, you guys can even make it official." Watching her face twist in absolute speechless shock, I grabbed my suit jacket and walked out without looking back. For the next 2 weeks we lived in total physical isolation. She came home every day but locked herself in the guest room. Our rescue cat Waffles seemed to sense the dead atmosphere, pacing anxiously in the hallway every single night. This was the cat she held when she blushingly confessed her love to me. Back when the stars in her eyes made me believe in forever. Now I just quietly carried Waffles into the master bedroom, brushing his fur and listening to his comforting purrs. Meanwhile my career skyrocketed without the emotional drain. The late-night lights in my downtown office witnessed my grind. My boss was stunned by my new laser focus and promoted me. One night I was opening my laptop to finalize a pitch, when an audio message from Ethan popped up on my phone. His voice dripped with arrogant provocation. He said, "I can give the watch back if you're that insecure. Chloe never said it was bought with your joint account anyway." I stared at the audio waveform with ice in my veins. I replied, "Keep it, I don't want things that have been in the trash. I understand people love to show off what they desperately lack." The second the message sent, the guest room door flew open. Chloe charged at me like an enraged lioness. She screamed, "If you have a problem, take it out on me. Why are you being so passive-aggressive to Ethan?" I looked at her shaking shoulders with absolute calm. I said, "Since you care about his feelings so much, let's break up." She froze, completely paralyzed as if struck by lightning. In the past, whenever she threatened to leave me, I would write 1,000-word apologies and buy her expensive gifts. She always banked on my fatal weakness of needing her. So when those 2 words slipped out of my mouth so easily, her proud sense of control instantly cracked wide open. She stuttered, asking if I was losing my mind from working too much. I ignored her and neatly saved my documents. They say the day you truly leave, the door closes the quietest. No hysterical screaming, no shattered glass on the floor. Just a bone-chilling indifference and absolute finality. Later Ethan started provoking me even more online, posting screenshots of Chloe editing his resumes, posting pictures of them sitting across from each other at nice cafes. The mundane little routines that used to belong to us were slowly being infected and taken over by a stranger. But my heart was like an ancient well after a storm. No ripple could ever break that profound silence again. Until our mutual friends hosted a dinner party in River North, celebrating someone getting a massive startup funding. I arrived 30 minutes late because of a board meeting. When I pushed the private room doors open, Ethan was smirking. He dragged out his words, saying I thought the busy man was too scared to show. I didn't even give him a side glance and walked to an empty seat. His habit of treating rudeness as a personality trait just looked like a pathetic clown act to me now. The seating arrangement at the large table was very telling. Chloe and Ethan were sitting shoulder to shoulder at the head, and the chairs next to them were piled high with coats and bags. I calmly pulled out a chair in the furthest corner. When ordering, Chloe loudly reminded the waiter, "Make sure the roasted salmon has absolutely no onions." I looked at the water glass reflecting the chandelier, remembering how I used to love spicy food and onions. But I quit eating everything I loved just to accommodate her taste. Back then Ethan sat across from us smiling smugly, saying, "Liam, you're so lucky to have a girl who remembers your order." But the lucky one was never me, it was always the one she favored. A friend couldn't stand the awkward tension anymore. He grabbed the menu and told the waiter, "Liam loves onions. Make a separate spicy portion with extra onions just for him." Chloe's head snapped up and she stared at me, her eyes filled with a bizarre mix of shock and confusion, as if she just realized after 3 years together, she didn't know a single basic thing about my preferences. I met her panicked gaze and let out a mocking smirk. I said, "You can keep that luck, I've tolerated you long enough." The temperature in the room dropped below freezing, until someone tried to smooth things over by pouring shots. They told Ethan to down a glass of tequila. Chloe immediately reached out and blocked his glass. She said his stomach is acting up, I'll take a double shot for him. The room went dead silent as eyes darted between us. Someone joked loudly, looks like Chloe is fiercely loyal. Protecting her guy best friend even if it ruins her liver. Chloe may be trying to save face or just used to my silence. Laughed and said I've always been the protective type. Nobody dared to respond to that insane comment. All the spotlight shifted directly onto my face. That was the exact moment I slowly wiped my mouth. Stood up and gave this absurd relationship a standing ovation. After the dinner I walked alone on the freezing Chicago streets. The icy drizzle soaked into my trench coat. Chloe had predictably chosen to drive Ethan home. I didn't have an umbrella, so I just walked under the yellow streetlights, letting the rain wash away the last trace of her scent on me. When I finally got back to the apartment, the floor lamp was on. Chloe was sitting on the sofa, still maintaining her arrogant posture. She looked at my wet shoulders and tested the waters. Did you enjoy embarrassing me in front of everyone tonight? I tossed my soaked coat onto the entryway rack. I said watching you two perform that self-moving duet was highly entertaining. Surprisingly, she didn't throw things or scream like she used to. Instead, she softened her voice and tried to grab my hand. She used an incredibly gentle but utterly cruel tone. Ethan's lease is up and he has nowhere to stay right now. I want him to crash in our guest room. For a few weeks. We're all friends anyway, it's normal to help each other out. If I heard this boundary-destroying request a month ago, I would have flipped the coffee table and fought her to the death. But now I just felt terrified by how much of a stranger she was. What kind of twisted logic made her think this was acceptable? I pulled my hand back, looking at her like a lifeless statue. I said, since you're so generous, you two can have the whole place. This apartment we put the down payment on for our future marriage. Now just looked like a massive joke, burning my eyes. She clearly didn't expect me to give up the property so cleanly. Her face went pale and she said, are you really throwing a tantrum over this? Even if I stay at a hotel, I won't let you two exist in this space. After saying that, she turned and slammed the heavy door behind her. I looked at the vibrating security door, remembering when I caught them sharing headphones in a karaoke booth. I had slammed the door hoping she would chase after me. But now I didn't even have the desire to text her goodbye. I poured all my energy into my career after that. My new project made a massive breakthrough and the board loved it. I was appointed as the regional director for our core division. The massive salary bump gave me absolute freedom. I moved into a penthouse closer to the office overlooking the skyline. And that was when Chloe started her frantic, desperate attempts to win me back. She stopped going to any social events that included Ethan. She started texting me her daily location like a tracker. She even went to Whole Foods to buy the seafood I used to love. One night I was working late and my stomach cramped from hunger. I went back to the old apartment to pack my last few boxes. And found her standing in the kitchen holding a bowl of hot beef stew. I looked at her burned fingers and her eyes full of hope. And suddenly felt that this late affection was cheaper than dirt. I used to fall asleep on the couch waiting for her to cook once. She told me she wasn't built for the kitchen and told me to stop forcing it. Turns out she wasn't incapable, I just wasn't worth her time. I pushed the bowl away, spilling the broth onto the expensive oak table. I said, stop doing things that move you but disgust everyone else. A person's taste buds change completely when their heart dies. Looking at you now makes my chest feel heavy and suffocated. The moment I stopped loving you, my body knew it before my brain did. She stared at the cooling grease on the table with red eyes. Late that night while I was packing books, her phone lit up. It was Ethan's profile picture with a highly suggestive text. He said, "Chloe, are you really giving me up for that boring guy?" I looked at the English letters glowing on the screen and felt pure absurdity. I closed my laptop, grabbed my coat and walked out of the building. The midnight air at Millennium Park was intoxicatingly fresh. The moonlight hit the lake like a giant flawless emerald. I took a deep breath, feeling my future opening up infinitely. Why waste my life on someone who doesn't know how to cherish it? True abandonment isn't blocking or deleting someone. It's when you look at their name and your heart rate doesn't change at all. She even tracked me down to my corporate office lobby. It was pouring rain outside, thunder shaking the glass walls. A coworker handed me a black umbrella saying someone was waiting. I went down and saw her standing outside the revolving doors, completely soaked. Her perfect makeup washed away, looking like a broken doll. When I pushed the door open and handed her the umbrella, her eyes lit up. She gripped the handle and cried, "I knew you still cared about me." I took a step back, maintaining an absolute physical distance. I said, "I just don't want security thinking we have a crazy person loitering." She sobbed, saying, "I know I was wrong. I cut off all contact with him. What do I have to do to make you forgive me for crossing the line?" I stood on the steps looking down at her pathetic face. I said, "Do you really think it was just a simple boundary mistake? Your mistake was treating my bottom line as a stepping stone. If I had a female best friend who shared my deepest secrets. If I spent the night looking at the city lights with her while you were sick. Would you believe we had a pure innocent friendship?" She opened her mouth to argue but couldn't force a single word out. Because she knew exactly how dirty that lucky mentality was. I didn't give her another second of my time and walked back inside, leaving her and that black umbrella in the freezing rain. A few days later I actually got a call from Ethan. His voice sounded frantic and almost begging. He said, "Chloe is in the hospital with a bleeding ulcer, can you come see her?" I sat in my spacious corner office looking at the bright sun outside. My voice was as calm as discussing a voided contract. I said, "Since your souls are so connected, you should take care of her. Stop using these cheap pity tactics to interrupt my life." I hung up and permanently blocked his number. Shortly after, I took my parents on a cabin trip to Colorado. The sun shined on the snowy mountains and my parents smiled brightly. My mom held my hand and said she always knew I was unhappy before. Watching my confidence fade away just to please Chloe. They were heartbroken but thought I had to figure it out myself. Now seeing me stand tall and take back control of my life. They said even if I never married they would be incredibly proud of me. Feeling the crisp mountain breeze, my eyes got a little blurry. Real love in this world should never make you feel inferior or afraid. When we got back, I went to the old apartment to clear it out completely. I pushed the door open and saw Chloe kneeling on the hardwood floor. On the coffee table was a custom diamond ring. She looked up at me with desperate, crazy devotion in her eyes. She said, "Liam, let's get married. I promise I'll be the perfect wife." Looking at this deeply ironic scene, a massive wave of exhaustion hit me. When I needed her the most, she chose coldness and retreat. Now that she lost control, she tried to use marriage as a trap. Before I could even speak, the doorbell rang aggressively. Ethan stood outside looking pale, his eyes darting between us. He screamed, "Chloe, you told me I was the only one in your heart. Why have you been hiding from me and why are you proposing to him?" The absurd drama had finally reached its peak. I took a step back and gave the stage to these two tangled messes. I said, "Whatever toxic game you two are playing has nothing to do with me. Whether it's deep love or betrayal, go digest it yourselves." I picked up my packed suitcase and the cat carrier with waffles inside, and walked out of the prison that had trapped me for 3 years without looking back. Walking by the Chicago Riverwalk, I pulled out the key with her fingerprints on it and tossed it into the deep water along with a box of old memories. The water rippled for a second before returning to absolute stillness. Just like my mind right now, crystal clear without a single shadow. The sky was a flawless blue, the sun warming my shoulders. From this exact second forward, my life was finally cloudless.